Welcome to the 31st episode of the Huggy Poker Vlog. I recently put out a poll to see what you're all interested in watching for an upcoming vlog, and here's a snapshot of the results prior to putting this vlog together. Most of you were interested in watching the huge winning Bomb Pop PLO game. In second place we had the losing 1-2 game, and in third was the break-even 1-3 game. So this episode is going to be a super quick session lasting only about an hour and 45 minutes at Texas Card House in North Austin. I get a seat at a round of each table, meaning we're alternating every orbit between 1-2 no limit hold'em and $5 PLO bomb pots. I'm not sure what the max buy-in is, so I buy in for $300 like I would for a game of 1-2 and grab a seat. About 10 minutes into our session, we get the first interesting hand. If you're not familiar with PLO bomb pots, everyone pays $5, we're all dealt a PLO hand, and everyone heads straight to the flop with two boards without any pre-flop action happening. I will note that a lot of these pots are chopped due to two boards and hands typically being strong on only one of them. We've got Jack 8, 7-5 with hearts, and we're sitting in the hijack. There's 8 players of the flop, which comes Jack 6 Jack with 2 diamonds on top and Queen 8 7 rainbow on bottom. So we've got trips on the top board and bottom 2 pair on the bottom board. It checks to us and I make it $30. Just the cutoff calls and we're heading to the turn, which comes the 3 of diamonds on top and the 9 of clubs on bottom. So the flush comes in on top and some straights come in on the bottom board. I check and our opponent checks back, thankfully. The river brings the 9 of hearts and the 8 of diamonds, so we don't improve on top, but we do pick up a boat on the bottom board. I make it 75, expecting to be ahead on at least one of the boards, and our opponent folds, so we end up scooping. The very next hand we get Jack 10 7-7 with diamonds. There's 8 players to the flop, which comes Deuce King 8 rainbow on top and 7 9 6 with 2 hearts on bottom. So we flop second set and a gut shot straight draw on the bottom board, but it's a very wet connected board. There are a number of straights possible that are ahead of us, so we're going to play this one cautiously. It checks around to us, and surprisingly it checks around, so we get a free turn, which comes the 8 of hearts and the ace of clubs. We don't improve on either board, and even though it checked around on the flop, there are some non-nutted straights that would have checked through there. However, it checks around to us a second time, so I'm willing to make a small bet to charge drawing hands to see a river. I put out a bet of $20 and we get 4 callers. The river brings the 3 of hearts and the 5 of hearts. This is pretty much the worst river for us. All sorts of straights and flushes get there, and I've got no intention of putting any more money into the pot. The first player pots it for $140, the player to our right calls, and I muck our hand. The player behind calls as well, and we see that the initial bettor has ace king suited and hearts for the flush on bottom, with the other players both holding 8-3 for the boat on top, so we made a good fold. Just 3 hands later, we've got Jack Jack 8 deuce with hearts. There's 8 players to the flop, which comes 9 king ace all hearts on top and 7 jack deuce rainbow on bottom. So we flop a jack high flush on the top board and the absolute nuts with top set on the bottom board. I'm happy to get the money in here, so after the small blind checks, I lead out for 25. Just the button calls, so we're heads up to the turn, which shouldn't change anything when it brings the 8 of clubs and the 4 of hearts. I want to start getting some money in the pot while charging draws, so I pot it for $90. The button folds and we take it down. Just 2 hands later, we've got Jack 10 8 6 double suited. There's 7 players to the flop, which comes 7 4 10 rainbow on top and King 6 Queen rainbow on bottom. So we've got top pair with a double gut shot on the top board, any 5 or 9 gives us the nuts, and an open-ended straight draw with bottom pair on the bottom board. It checks to us, and I pot it for 35. Just the hijack calls, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings the deuce of hearts and the deuce of diamonds. We brick out on both boards, so when our opponent checks to us, I'm happy to check this one back and take the free card. I found that most people are less willing to fold in this game compared to hold'em, so bluffing is probably not a great play here. The river brings the 5 of hearts and the 9 of spades. Our opponent immediately bets pot for $105. Well, we hit the nut straight on both boards, though the flush comes in on top. I'm happy to get the money in though, and I push all in for $310 total. The hijack insta-calls. We show our hand and he shows King Jack 10 deuce for the same straight on bottom, but only 2 pair on top, so he's getting quartered and we're getting 3/4 of the pot for $545. 2 hands later, we're back in a hold'em orbit and we get pocket jacks in the hijack. The under the gun player raises to 5, the player on our right raises to 15, and we've got the jiggity, so we're going to bump it up again. We make it 50, and it folds around to the big blind, who flat calls. As soon as this player calls, I'm thinking he's probably got a hand like ace king or ace queen at worst, or some kind of mid-high pocket pair. The player on our right calls, so the 3 of us are headed to the flop, and we're hoping to not see any overcards. We do not get our wish as the flop comes down ace high, and even worse, the cold calling big blind leads out for $50. The player on our right folds, and I fold and show, hoping to see what the big blind had. He's nice enough to show that he has ace-king, unsurprisingly, meaning our fold was good, and the player on our right shares that he had pocket tens. The very next hand, we've got king-queen offsuit middle position. The under the gun player straddles for 5, the +1 and +2 players both call, and I raise it up to 25. The player to our left immediately 3-bets to 75, and the big blind cold calls. I should probably be folding here, maybe calling sometimes when my hand is suited, but I'm a bit frustrated about the last hand, which is obviously not a good excuse to play a hand, but I'm being real, and here we are. I make the call, and the 3 of us head to the flop. The flop comes 4-jack-5 with 2 hearts, so we flop a whole lot of nothing. The big blind checks, I check, and the player to our left c-bets for 125. Obviously, there's not much more to do here other than fold, which we do, and unfortunately, we don't get to see what our opponent had. 2 hands later, we've got pocket 8s in the +1 position. The first player folds, and I bump it up to $10. The player on our left once again 3-bets us, making it $35 this time. Everyone else folds, and I make the call. The flop comes 5-9-10 with 2 hearts. It's not the best flop for our hand, but it's not the worst if our opponent has a big ace. I check to our opponent, and he ends up checking back. The turn brings the 3 of clubs, and I consider leading, but I don't want to take ourselves to value time if he checked back an overpair, so I check once again with the intention of probably calling a bet. He makes it $50. It's a pretty healthy bet, but not excessively so. It doesn't really feel like a bluff, and I'm thinking we may be up against a larger pair. I'm not certain though, and since we've underrepped our hand, I'm not quite ready to fold yet, so I call to see what transpires. The ace comes in on the river, as does the flush draw. I ponder momentarily about turning our hand into a bluff and betting out here, but I'm iffy about our opponent's holding, and I'm not sure that it'll garner a fold, so I ultimately just check with the intention of giving up. Our opponent checks back, and we see that he has pocket queens, so perhaps a river bluff would have worked. 10 minutes later, we've got another bump out orbit, and this time we've got ace, jack 9 with clubs and hijack. We've got 9 players to the flop, which comes deuce 6-5 with 2 spades on top, and 10-6-3 with 2 spades on bottom. Our hand was pretty before the flop with the aces in the hole, but we catch a whole lot of nothing on the flop, no pairs, no draws, and when we see a pot-sized bet, we're giving this one up. 2 hands later, we've got jack 10-7-6 with diamonds. There's 9 players to the flop, which comes 9-10 deuce with 2 diamonds on top, and queen ace rainbow on bottom. So we flop top pair with a weak flush draw and a gut shot on top board, and pretty much nothing on the bottom. The action checks around, and we get a free turn, which brings the 7 of diamonds and the 4 of diamonds. So we pick up a 10 high flush, as well as 2 pair on the top board, meaning we could improve to a boat. We also pick up a flush draw on the bottom board, though the board's paired, and I'm not hoping for much there. It checks to the player on our right, who opens for 35. I call, though I'm not confident about our flush, and the under the gun player calls as well. The 3 of us head to the river, where we see the 10 of spades and the king of diamonds. So we bink the boat on the top board and manage to pick up a flush on the bottom as well. The under the gun player goes all in for his last 115, the player on our right folds, and we make an easy call. Our opponent shows that he has pocket 9s for a smaller boat, and our hand is good on both boards for the scoop. Alright y'all, this is the hand you've been waiting for. We get dealt queen 10 8-5 with hearts in the big blind. There's 9 players to the flop, which comes 9 jack deuce with 2 diamonds on top, and 5-9-6 with 2 spades on bottom. We've got a wrap on the top board. Any offsuit 7, 8, or king gives us the nuts, while a 10 or queen gives us the second nuts. On the bottom board, we've got bottom pair with a gut shot. An offsuit 7 would give us the nuts. Despite our draws, there are 2 flush draws out there, and I don't want to lead out here and bloat the pot. Straights aren't as strong in PLO as they are in holdem when there are still cards to come, when there are flush draws and board pairing opportunities that put us way behind. It checks around to the button, who pots it for $45. The player on our right calls, and I want to see another card, so I call as well. Another player asks how much it would cost to pot it, but she ends up just making the call instead. 2 more players call, so we've got 6 of us heading to the turn, which brings the queen of hearts and the ace of hearts. So we hit our straight on top, though we're losing to king 10, and we pick up a 10 high flush draw on the bottom board as well. It checks to the woman who asked how much potting would cost on the flop, and now she leads out for $200. Given her question on the flop, I'm not inclined to give her credit for a hand that beats us on the top board. I'm thinking she's probably got the straight on the bottom board and wanted to see a safe turn before going with her hand. There's 1 fold before the next player calls the $200, and the button immediately pushes all in for his last $95. The player on my right thinks for a moment and calls the $200 as well. We're closing the action, and now we've got to decide if our hand is good. I already put the original bettor on a range that I think is in favor of the bottom board, and given that no one raised the $200 bet, I don't think any of the callers has the nuts on the top board. My only concern would be the player who's all in for less, since we don't know if he would have called or raised with more chips behind. Ultimately, I decide that there's enough of a chance that our hand is good, so I want to go with it. But do we want to call or raise? We've got another 255 behind, and I feel like both options are legitimate. After thinking about it, I decide that given how many players are in the pot, no one is folding to a raise here, and we'd be committing all our chips with one card yet to come. By calling, we can ensure that the flush doesn't come and that the board doesn't pair before putting the rest of the money in, knowing that we're only losing to King 10 and still probably getting the chips from these players once we know we're good. With that, I go with a call, putting 200 into the pot. The river brings the 3 of clubs and the 7 of hearts. The flush misses on both boards, and we manage to hit the backdoor flush on the bottom as well. The first player checks, and I push all in for our last 255. The woman who asked about the pot size folds, and the next player calls all in for his last 70. The last player folds, and it's time for showdown. The player in the second side pot shows 8-7 for the flop straight on the bottom board that we sucked out on with the flush, so we're taking that side pot. The shorter stack all-in player shows pocket aces for a turn set on the bottom board that didn't fill up. Our hand is good on both boards, and we're scooping an absolutely massive pot. 3 hands later, we've got ace-ace 5-4 rainbow in the cutoff. There's 9 players to the flop, which comes jack 7 king, all diamonds on top, and 9-5 ace with 2 diamonds on bottom. So we flop the nuts with top set on the bottom board. It checks to us, and I open for 30. Just the small blind calls, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings the 10 of diamonds and the 9 of hearts. So we fill up on bottom, and given how many diamonds are out there, I'm not too worried about our opponent wanting to stick around for the top board. He checks to us, and I bet pot for 105. He quickly folds, and we take it down. Well, that was absolutely insane. Most of the profit from the day obviously came from a single bomb pot hand that just happened to have everything go right in our favor. We bought in for 300, we cashed out for 1,612, and after fees and tips, booked a profit of $1,278. So that was an hourly rate of $730, not too shabby. Alright you guys, these videos take a lot of effort, and every like and subscribe that they get helps the YouTube algorithm to figure out who to suggest these video to, and it really helps the channel out. So it'd really mean a lot to me if you'd hit the like button, and if you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you drop a comment below, I do my best to get back to everybody, so please go ahead and drop a message, and I'll get back to you as well. Until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.